Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Candy. I'm the Operations Administrator for Living Well, and I want to thank you for joining and attending our clinical trials discussion. And I'd like to thank, we'd especially like to thank Jenny Mitchell of Lurie for putting on this presentation for us. So Jenny, thank you so much, and please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. I'm here to just kind of give a quick talk about clinical trials and the role that they play in our cancer center and then generally our cancer world within the Northwestern setting. So clinical trials have been around a very long time. The first one was recorded in 562 BC, and it was for King Nebuchadnezzar to decide what diet would best fit his people. And so it was the first one that we found that they did a controlled study to see which diet worked better for his folks and to make a decision about public health. We have come a long way since that point. At Lurie Cancer Center, we have had over 35,000 participants enrolled in clinical research studies since becoming a NCI designated cancer center. We have come a long way since that point. We have enrolled over 35,000 participants in clinical studies since becoming an NCI designated cancer center. We work on the 3 Ps are what we work on. So practice changing. So it means how you are delivering care. Is it a different medication? Is it a different method of delivery? Is it a different order of delivery? A paradigm shift. So are you learning about a bigger body? So is there a large, like epidemiological, for instance, like is exercise impactful for cancer? And then policy influences are something that we can do as a society or a government that would help influence health. The Lurie Cancer Center is one of 71 national cancer institutes and one of 52 comprehensive cancer centers. So to become a comprehensive cancer center, you have to reach a gold standard of excellence in cancer prevention, in clinical services, and in research. This is not that easy to do, and that is why there's only 52 of them, but it is also why these institutions are really the leaders in clinical research across our nation. Lurie's Cancer Center has really focused on the expansion of our clinical research program in the most recent years. We have steadily moved across the Chicagoland area to north, west, south, and we keep on pushing out. Oak Brook was our most recent addition to our clinical research family, but we have many more planned in the pipeline. And so really the goal is to bring care closer to home and so that people can access these clinical research studies where they live. And so they don't always have to travel to downtown to take advantage of the academic medicine that's happening in the Chicagoland area. Clinical research is a really broad field, and it includes so many different aspects and so much more than just clinical trials. No one definition has been accepted by everyone, but the NIH attempted to define it as research in which people or data or samples of tissue from people are studied to understand health and disease. So their goal was, in fact, to make the category as broad as possible to make sure that they are not closing off avenues of research that we find promising for various studies. So I think probably the most obvious and the most well-known is the patient-oriented research. This is research that involves like the direct treatment of patients. So the clinical trials, are we trying out a new medicine? Are we trying out a new device? Are we trying out a new method of caring for our patients? Then there's the epidemiological research and the behavioral research. So this studies a broader swath of people. So as you gather like large macro bodies of information, you can see if there are trends and see if there are ways that we can help more individual people by studying the broader population. And then there are outcomes and health services research. Are there ways that we can help support people and their health? So does home nursing make a difference, for instance? Are there economic toxicities that go along with cancer? So some of those more societal pieces to the actual disease itself to help really learn all aspects of the disease. Clinical trials are probably your most well-known and what people think of the most when they think of research. And so that is the research that involves human subjects to find better treatments, therapies, and vaccines. And so it's the treatments and the therapies that make these clinical trials. So that is what we're testing, and that is what we're trying to find better and better treatments that we can have for our patients. So there's 4 phases of clinical trials. The first phase is the newest. This is first in humans. This is the first time we are testing out these therapies in people. And this is to test for safety, for what dosage we should be dosing people at, and to find out what side effects occur at those dosages. The phase 2 of clinical trials, it becomes a much larger group of people that you are beginning to test for. So phase 1 studies often have 20, 30 people in them to kick off the testing and to set some of those guidelines for the second phase of treatment. So they are testing, now you're starting to see tests for the efficacy. How is this working? Is it working better than we thought, worse than we thought? And what are the side effects that are happening as we're testing it? Phase 3 are going to be your much larger studies. So these are the studies that you would have hundreds and sometimes thousands of people involved in to really see the more long-term effectiveness, how it compares with other treatments that are already happening, how it interacts with those other treatments. It's just a bigger bucket, and that this one is the most important for efficacy. So they are trying to find out, does this work? After phase 3 is when a company or whatever body can apply for FDA approval for a treatment. So they can now use this safely in the public. You can be prescribed this medication and so on. And then a phase 4 trial is post-market. So this is to continue to test and continue to follow for the efficacy and the safety, and also for some of the side effects. So they these are mandatory. The companies still have to do them after they get FDA approval, because there are often things you find in a much broader study of a phase 4. So this one would be thousands of patients often, that you can see more effectively, like the efficacy and the side effects and its comparison to other things. So just as kind of a general understanding, this is how many participants that Northwestern puts on, like new participants they put on each year for studies that involve an intervention. So some kind of change in practice and testing of that change. Sometimes that change is a medication and sometimes that change is a behavior, but we are generally in the 3,000s every year for these studies. If you include observational studies, so studies that we are just recording data about people without doing any kind of change to their behavior, you're more in the 5,000s. So we have a ton of people participating in our clinical research at Northwestern, and we're really proud of the people that we're able to bring on and to be able to expand these programs as far as we can. Because we are an academic medical center, this is kind of the breakdown of the phases that we tend to put people on. So phase 1 and phase 2 tend to be our most prominent studies that we are working on, with some elements of phase 3. So it is often the case for academic medical centers that this is going to be the vast majority of their portfolio. They have both the ability and the expertise to conduct more technical trials than some more community centers do, but those are the ones that you're generally going to see at Northwestern and at academic centers. And these are also the ones that we are really pushing now to bring into the community. And so to be able to harness the expertise of that academic medical center to be able to expand across the network of the Northwestern centers. So how do patients get involved with clinical trials? Their physician is the most common road into these clinical research studies. They are, depending on the location and their own personal expertise, they're often very involved in the selection of the trials that come to both the institution and to the locations. They're well aware of what new things are coming into the institution. We have monthly meetings, we have tumor boards, we have a lot of avenues that we make sure that our physicians kind of keep up to date with all the newest things that are coming into our facility. Another avenue are our research study staff. These tend to be studies that don't have the intervention, so they're more of like data collection or like a blood draw study. It's a little bit simpler of a study component, but they those are the ones that you're going to have more of like your research staff approaching patients about it. There are also very large scale studies that are that are done across the Northwestern institution, and they will have dedicated staff that are assigned to those studies, and they are on the lookout for patients to participate in those studies as their main focus. And then we also have patients that come to us to ask about studies. They have heard about them there are studies that they advertise on the news. There are studies that people have looked up on the internet or they have heard about through various news sources. And there are friends and family that have been doing the same thing and are interested in learning more about these studies. And so in those cases, we do, we hear about them from patients all the time, and we love to be able to speak to those with our patients. In my next slide, I have other information about how you can contact us for those sorts of things as well. I just wanted to give one quick example of a large scale project that we have going on at our institution, and it's the OncoSet program. We have thousands of patients on this study at this point, and it is also the study that we roll out first at all of our newest locations. And it is a project by which we take people's genetic testing information and put it in a very large database. It's de-identified, so the researchers don't know who it belongs to. And then they are able to use this large bank of information on various research projects. So that's where you get like your epidemiological elements to the research, so they can see, are there broad trends, are there major things that are happening within this genetic information that informs cancer research. So they've published in multiple journals and are moving ever onward. So we're adding people to this study every single day across the entire Northwestern network. So there are a lot of people that are involved in conducting clinical trials, and there's good reason for that. We are doing research with people, and we want to make sure that this is done with the utmost care and the utmost safety and as much oversight as we can bring to bear to make sure it is all going the way that it was designed to go. So the Institutional Review Board is also known as the IRB. They review every single protocol that comes into the institution, and they approve or disapprove those protocols based on a variety of criteria that involves scientific criteria as well as ethical criteria. They review all the studies that come in, and also they ask sometimes for modifications. Like they could say, we don't approve your study at this moment, but we will if you can provide more information or do a better job around this element of your protocol. So that's kind of the first line of defense when a study comes into the institution for review, and to make sure that it is a study that is put together well and also is being done ethically. The principal investigator and the research team. So these are the folks that are going to oversee the study on the ground and also conduct the study on the ground. The principal investigator is the doctor in charge of the entire study, and he is the person who will monitor and kind of do the day-to-day of making sure that everything is going appropriately. The quality control. So there's monitoring and auditing throughout an entire study. So from beginning to end, if the trial is sponsored externally, so say like Pfizer is sponsoring a study, they will have people come in and review all of the data and all of your documentation and kind of the day-to-day stuff as kind of a second set of eyes. If it is a study that we have created and are sponsoring ourselves, we have a team that has designed to do that internally as well. So you need more than one person looking at things at all times, just to make sure that your data is good as well as it's being conducted safely. And then the FDA is also involved in reviewing and approving protocols as well as new drugs. So we have, and obviously that's more of like a government oversight. So there are many components that we have to make sure that we are protecting the rights and welfare of our participants and that the trial is being conducted appropriately and ethically. The patient safety is the most important piece of clinical research. We have many SOPs, we have guidelines for documentation, we have monitoring visits both internally and externally, we have audits, we have FDA inspections, and then we have the HIPAA rules about your privacy. And so there are tons of different avenues that we have and we follow to make sure that we are conducting research in as safe a way as we possibly can with the patient's rights and welfare at the forefront of our concern. The informed consent process is really where that begins for a patient. This is when you are introduced to a study initially, and an investigator and his staff will walk through the entire consent form and also the study itself. So the consent forms for cancer clinical trials tend to be very long because they are more and more complex studies, and we want to make sure that we have as much information for our patients as possible. There are, I would say most of the time, we are sending home copies of consent forms or sending them to patients in advance so they have time to read them and process and to think about their questions and to understand really what they're being involved in and what they're signing on to participate in for each individual study. Participation is 100% voluntary, and people can quit at literally any moment at any point in the study. We are not signing people on to lock them into a specific treatment if they no longer feel like that is the best course of action for them. It will also outline the benefits of being on the study, the confidentiality pieces that are involved with clinical research, compensation, and like what is covered by the study. So say, is the sponsor providing the drug for this study for free, that type of thing. Also alternatives, and then just a broad description of the research that's happening itself, as well as a blow by blow of the clinical elements that are involved in that study. But this is really the very first step for a patient getting on a study, and it is incredibly important that it is done well, that it is done thoroughly, and that we want to make sure that people are as comfortable launching into being a participant in a study as we possibly can. These are really just the basic elements of a clinical trial protocol. So all protocols do follow a pretty standard formula. All of these elements must be included in the study so people can understand from the beginning to the end what is happening. So you need to know how this study came to be. What is the background information of why we have decided that this is a study that we want to conduct? You need to know the basic objectives and endpoints. Sometimes there's more than one. Like, are we looking at just the efficacy of the medication? Are we also looking at disease progression or stable disease, or do we also need genetic information? Or, so there could be more than one objective or endpoint. the design of the trial, like how are patients put into what groups? So are you randomized? Is it physician's choice? Is everybody in the same group? Things like that. The inclusion and the exclusion, is this patient a fit for the study? Because you need to have some level of standardization on these clinical trials so you can do as good a comparison as you possibly can amongst all your subjects. Each study has a pretty, not always extensive, but sometimes extensive inclusion and exclusion criteria to make sure that we are getting people that have the best possibility of doing well in the study and being this treatment to work for them as best we can. The treatment plan, like how are we dosing people? If this medication makes them sick, can we change it? Or is there, what things can we change to tweak from patient to patient? Study assessments, what is involved in being on the study? Are you getting a scan every 3 months? Are you getting an EKG done every third day? Are you getting blood draws? Things like that. The statistical consideration is, how will we know if the study is working? Do we have enough patients that are involved in all the different arms? That sort of thing. And then the general study management, like how to make sure that we're all doing things in the standardized way that helps support and keep the data as consistent as possible. And then supplements tend to be questionnaires or just other elements of the study, lab manuals and things like that, it is really important for you to know and have as a study personnel conducting the study to make sure you're following all the procedures and protocols. So common questions that we have, are clinical trials only for people that know other options? And that's definitely not true. We have trials that people come onto at all different phases of their disease progression or post-disease progression. Sometimes at the very beginning, sometimes after you've tried a couple of lines of therapy. Some of them are even comparing to standard of cares. And so if we know that you're using this one, if you want to be on the study so we can learn more about this, to compare it to someone who has chosen this one. So there are lots of different types of studies that you can participate in, and it absolutely is not because there are no other options available to you. Where can I learn more about clinical trials? So there is a government website called clinicaltrials.gov that it is by law, all clinical trials have to be registered on this website. They do a pretty good of a general synopsis. It tells you where trials are being conducted. So all the sites that are participating on the trial, the inclusion, exclusion criteria, all of those sorts of things. And then where can I learn more about clinical trials at Northwestern? We have a hotline, essentially, that you can call to ask about clinical trials in your particular area. And we also have an email address that is manned by a nurse within the clinical trial cancer. It's in the clinical trials office or the cancer center. This is just what the clinicaltrials.gov website looks like. So it's a pretty straightforward search function. And I have found it to be a really pretty easy site to use. So if you're looking for something and you're just kind of broad strokes want information about it, this is really not a bad place to start for information about clinical trials. So we have clinical trials have essentially 4 sponsor types. The sponsor is the person who is putting on the trial. And it is not necessarily always the person who is paying for it. It's like the person who owns that trial, the person who's in control of the data, who's in control of the methods and the writing of the protocol and how that study is being conducted. So Northwestern has a lot of investigator-initiated studies, and you find this at most of your academic medical centers, that you have a lot of your physicians are also physician scientists. So they are both interested in the care of their current patients, but also in new and novel therapies that might work for people, in their disease area. So the one trial I referenced, the OncoSet, that's a large database. That is an investigator-initiated study that he put together to be able to have a repository of data to look into various questions that come up as they're working with their patients. Investigators absolutely can get support or supplies from our pharmaceutical sponsors. It's something that they all kind of work in symbiosis together in that respect. So for instance, like AbbVie might donate the drug to a particular study that one of our investigators has designed and written. In this case, we are considered the sponsor, and so then we hold the IND. So we hold the responsibility and the risk for the conduct of that study. This requires us to submit a huge amount of information to the FDA, as well as get their approval on the protocol itself before we roll it out and start enrolling subjects on there. So the National Clinical Trials Network. So these are studies that are sponsored by the federal government. So the NCI, they have a lot of different cooperative groups that work with them in various disease specialties. So like breast cancer and GI and radiation therapy and a lot of different areas, but we are considered a lead academic participating site, a LAP site, because we enroll such high numbers to these trials and contribute in such a significant way. Many times our investigators are part of the leadership committees for these. They are on the papers that they write about them, so they help move that research forward. The sponsored trials, so these are conducted and designed by pharmaceutical companies to test out their novel therapies. They are writing them, they are conducting the monitoring of them, and we are enrolling participants on these studies. Oftentimes, these are going to be your most novel therapies. So this is another example of kind of the symbiosis of the research community and the pharmaceutical industry, that we work together to bring these to all of our patients. And then the fourth type is an external investigator-initiated study. So these are ones that, similar to our own investigator-initiated studies, but they are written by physicians and academics at other locations. So for instance, the University of Chicago might write a doctor at the University of Chicago might write a protocol, and then we would participate with them on that study. And so it is a way that academic centers definitely help each other, because as cancer research has gone on, it becomes more and more specific, and the pools of people tend to be a little bit smaller than maybe they were even 20 years ago. So you need as many people as possible to be able to participate and make sure that you make up the numbers so you can get to that statistical significance. And that is pretty much what I've got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it.